2 games into what looks like a long season for the R's, but we are QPR and we will be until we die. In this podcast, along with a special guest, I will be reviewing our last 2 games and discussing current topics. And my guest for this first podcast of the new season is Frankie Reilly, I should call you, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Who made an appearance on another Hoops and Dreams podcast that was focusing upon the new kit for this year. Welcome to you, Frankie.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I'm a graphic designer who is also now a kit manufacturer and mainly known for making my QPR designs on Twitter and Instagram.
That is not a bad accolade. That's not bad at all. Well done. That's good.
Thank you.
So how did you end up supporting the R's?
Didn't get a choice. What's it called? Although both my mum and dad are Chelsea, my granddad took the reins and said he's going to be a QPR fan, thankfully so. And I've been given this club to support instead of Chelsea, which, although they've won Champions Leagues, I get to go to every game I want to go to. So I'd much rather be a fan supporting that. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on, I guess. Well, let's talk about a quick review of our last 2 matches, which were Watford against QPR, which we lost 4-0. I'm trying to go that quickly. Cardiff against QPR, which we won 2-1 away from home. So we got a possible 3 points out of 6. Our league position is 16th on 3 points. It's early in the season, obviously. Can't read too much into that. But can we gather any comfort from these results, Frankie?
I'm more of an optimistic fan than most, I think, anyways. And Watford, I was 34 seconds in and I looked and I thought this is going to be a long old season. That's 45 more games like this. Yeah. However, going by the Cardiff result and the second half against Watford, everything's looked much more positive. I really liked how Dykes was playing in the Cardiff game, where it was more like he was a bit deeper and got a bit wider to allow Sinclair and Smith to be as the runners. It seems like this is the tactical change Ainsworth was going on about in his interview the other day. But if we play like we did against Cardiff, and with the reinforcements now of Steve Cook, who's going to have a lot of games to play, when Jimmy Dunn and Clark Salt will come back, as well as Colback coming into the team and any more potential signings, I'm looking a lot more optimistically at our season. And I genuinely do believe we can survive if we play like that. If we play anything like that first half in Watford, we might as well just say the season's done.
Yeah, I agree with you. The defeat against a good Watford side is frustrating because it literally was a game of 2 halves. You're absolutely right to highlight the second half. Second half, we seem to get things better organised. It beggars the question, I suppose, of why weren't we organised for the first half? But that's by the by. Or did in the second half, perhaps we dug deeper and a bit more commitment. I just don't know. I guess if you're a football manager, that's where you earn your money. In contrast, against Cardiff, we seem to be better prepared. Plus, we had the benefit of, as you said, of Cook and Fox at the back to steady the defence. And we saw far better performances from many of those same players. And it brought Sinclair's first championship goal and one for Kenny Powell as well. So, all in all, pretty good.
Yeah.
Right. Well, let's move from the past to the future. We've got 4 matches coming up that we want to feature. Norwich against QPR, which is the cup match this Wednesday. And then we follow that with on Saturday with QPR against Ipswich. So that's our first home game, I think, isn't it, that one?
Yeah, but it'll be first home game overall since the new pitch against Norwich, and then first league home game against Ipswich.
So that could be quite interesting, that. And then we follow that up with Southampton against QPR on the 26th of August and Middlesbrough against QPR on the 2nd of September. So let's quickly have a look at the cup game. Do you think Gareth Ainsworth will play a full-strength side and go all out to win this, Frankie?
I don't really think he can, because you have to look at how thin our squad actually is. If you play Chair 3 games in 8 days, you play Dykes 3 games in 8 days, you play Cook or Fox, or these crucial players who, if they get injured, we don't really have a proper replacement for them. It is a bit too risky. I'm hoping in terms of the defence, one of Fox or Cook will stay in, more likely Fox, and we bring up one of the youth players instead, like a Woodman or Trent Rendell, Henry Hawkins, any of those three who are right-footed defenders, rather than Gubbins, who had to put a left-back as the right centre-back because he's also left-footed. I feel like we could see more of players like Kelman and Dixon Bonner. Hopefully Richards gets a look in. And hopefully more youth players like the defenders or Rayan Colley, who was on the bench, Alex Ahora, who was on the bench. Unfortunately, Cargbo and Rafferty Peder have been injured, so they won't be involved at all. But I'd like to see more of the youth included, as well as resting some of our more crucial players in order for them to be fit in the league, which is much more important to us as we need to survive.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with you. I mean, I'd like to see Duke McKenna play. I'm quite impressed with how he's doing.
That's another one, yeah.
He reminds me of Sam Field. He just won't let the ball go. So, yeah, I'm with you on this. But I said on the Hoops and Dreams forum that I really do think that although lots of the fans want to go for a cash and glory cup run, if that's QPR. But if I was Gareth Ainsworth, without a doubt, I'd be focusing upon the championship. And I'd expect him to play lesser players from the squad alongside development players. So I agree with you on that. Okay, let's have a look at the 2 or 3 league fixtures after that. That's Ipswich, Southampton and Middlesbrough. Ipswich, 2 wins, top of the table. Quick one on this. What do you reckon? Win, lose?
They're a very well-drilled side, and as annoying as it is, as they are just promoted from League One, I would take a draw against these lot, despite it being a home game. I think we need to make sure that we know how we're going to play under Ainsworth. If we're not going to play these long balls all the time like he played at Wickham, we need to establish how we're going to play and make sure we're doing it properly. So a draw against a very well-drilled and very impressive-looking Ipswich side would be something I'd take any day of the week. Whether or not we get it, I'm not too sure, but I don't think we'd beat a very good Cardiff squad with like the likes of Aaron Ramsey, Josh Bowler, Kylan Grant behind a striker. So I'm going to go with a draw and, of course, hope for a win. But if we lose, I'm not going to be all too surprised.
No, I've gone for a draw as well for exactly the reasons that you've said. Yeah, I'm going to that match on Saturday and I shall be taking my prayer mat with me, but I expect it to be a draw. And Southampton, exactly the reasons that you've said. I mean, although they've only won 1 and drawn 1 in comparison to Ipswich, I've got that down as a loss because I think that they are going to be the side at the top or there and thereabouts. Which brings us to Middlesbrough. Now, Middlesbrough, they played Millwall and Coventry. That was a win and it was 2 losses, wasn't it? That's right. Millwall beat them. And then Coventry beat them quite convincingly.
They're currently bottom.
Yeah, much to my surprise. So what do you reckon for that one?
With Dieng in goal and potentially Chris Willock signing from as well, we will know some of the quality of what will be important players in their team. Akpom's about to leave to go to Ajax for a lot of money, or he's already left, I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
And they will be getting in more players. Hopefully not as many by the time we play them. But it's too hard to say they're on poor form because it's literally been 2 or 3 games. So if they turn it around in the next 2 weeks, they could, with a very good squad, they could batter us. However, we know what Dieng's like. We know how to play against a player we've had for about 5 or 6 years when he's been in the academy as well as coming through into the first team. We know what he's like. We know how to deal with him. But it's whether or not we get those goals and we can get the chances to get those goals against a very good Middlesbrough side. It's another result I'm going to go with a draw because I see that happening. But I think I'd lean more on us winning if we can get a draw against Southampton as well. I reckon if we get a draw against Ipswich and Southampton or a win in any of those 2 games, I think we beat Middlesbrough.
Yeah, and actually, what you've just said in a way mirrors what I think is going to happen. They're going to treat every game as it appears as the first game, the most important game, And then if we do well in the first game, then we'll do well in the second, and so on. Not rocket science, I know, but I think that's the right way to approach it. So, yeah, if we win against Ipswich, who knows? I'm with you, though. I've said a draw for Ipswich. I think we'll lose against Southampton. Logic says that. Middlesbrough, I think, is a win. So that would give us 4 points out of 9. Not to be sneezed at this stage of the year. Okay. Well, let's see how we do. I'm sure we'll be eating crow in some shape or form next week. Okay, on to our first topic. It seems obvious to all the supporters, and therefore it must have also seemed so to Gareth Ainsworth. The squad not only lacks depth at the moment, but also quality in the starting 11. The club sought to strengthen the midfield with the addition of Jack Colback, but he was not even on the bench for the first or second match. He also brought in Morgan Fox to strengthen the centre-back position, although unsurprisingly, he looked off pace against Watford. Now, Steve Cook came in as well as a further centre-back, and his arrival alongside Fox, I think, really did strengthen the defence, as we've said before. And it was just in time, because we then heard that Jimmy Dunn's absence was going to be for a few more weeks because of surgery. Well, they both featured in the Cardiff win, but I still think we urgently need a decent right back and a striker. Has the club done enough to stem the rot, Frankie?
Not yet, but I think we're getting there. Willock going for potentially 2 million to Middlesbrough is going to open up for us to get a lone striker. We're looking at that Jay Stansfield from Fulham, who got, yes, I think, 16, or it might be more goals at Exeter last season. We haven't really looked at a right back. We were interested in one player. I don't remember who exactly, which ain't great, but he went elsewhere. I think, yes, our depth at centre back, once they're all fit, is very, very good for a relegation-threatened team. Steve Cook, who's got plethora of Championship experience as well as Premier League experience. Jimmy Dunn, who has that bit of Premier League experience and has been a decent player for us. Clark Salter, who, when he's fit, is a great player. It's just he has the issue of staying fit for so long. Yeah. And Morgan Fox, who is a left-back who plays better in a back three, as he did seemingly with how certain people have described how we played against Cardiff, that we go into a three and then the wing-backs push forward, even though they're not really wing-backs. But Morgan Fox, who can play in a three and can do a job for us as a two, I think that's very good depth at centre-back. Midfield severely lacking because we've only got Field, Dazelle and Colback. And as much as people criticise Dazelle and certain people criticise Field as well, they're decent players for this level when they're on the top of their game. Field, I think, more so than Dazelle, but I don't necessarily think Dazelle is as bad a player as people make out. Colback has obviously been a free agent, so he's not trained with anyone, and now he's going to come back into the team, hopefully tomorrow, or he'll definitely be involved on the weekend. And I think that's a good free, but it's not a good total, because we've got Dixon Bonner after that, who's made about 2 or 3 professional appearances for us. We've got Rafferty Peder, who's a youth player, Alex Ahora, who's a youth player, who might be better off going out on loan and getting first team experience in League 2 or in the Vanarama Conference. But midfield needs a lot more depth. I think up front, we've got 3 strikers, 2 of which being Armstrong and Kelman, who Armstrong didn't get a goal for us last season. As much as we love him, we do have to realise that. And Kelman, who got about 7 goals for Leyton Orient, I think 7 goals as well. So it's not exactly great. And apparently he looks like he's off to Leyton Orient anyways. So I definitely think we need a better striker up front to go with Dykes, because I think Dykes is at his best when he has competition against him. When he had Austin come in the second half of his first season, he spurred on. When he had Andre Gray and Austin against him, he was very good. And last season, he didn't have competition up front. He had Jamal Lowe come in at the end and Chris Martin, but they came in whilst he was out with pneumonia. So I think if we get a striker who can challenge him and say, well, I'm going to start over you, I think Dykes is going to spur on, hopefully get more than 10 goals. But I do agree with you. I do think we definitely need a right back. I think Ozzy Kakai is a good backup right back, for the Championship. But starting week in, week out, I don't really think so.
Yeah, I actually think Kakai worked far better at centre back. I was impressed with him against Cardiff, how well he actually did. His problem, I feel, is when he's playing right back or even wing back, is that he tends to stand off of ball players and not close them down and stop them from doing those crosses. He's got this weird thing about it, and I hate it. But anyway, and Dykes, I think you said earlier on that Dykes played deeper against Cardiff than you expected, and I personally think that's part of Gareth Ainsworth's strategy, to have him pick up the balls that come through, contain them, and then move them on to whoever's playing up front ahead of him. And when it's Armstrong, we know he's got that burst of speed. We know he's a problem for others. We just need to get him goal scoring. Well, he's broken that initial problem. Hopefully now he'll go forward and score a good few more. But I agree, we do need somebody else up front. It's just too much to ask, I think, and I don't think Kelman is the answer. I was quite surprised that they kept him on. I really was. Okay, so with regard to Dazelle, quick question for you here. You were saying that Dazelle perhaps is not performing as well as he could where he is. Do you think perhaps if he played further forward, he might be of more interest to us?
I think his best, like, if he played as not necessarily a 6 like Sam Field is, or 6 or 4, whatever people want to call it, but
Yeah.
as like a deeper player to play the longer balls through the midfield. He's
Yeah.
got a good pass on him. We know that. We've seen it. But doesn't get stuck in. That's his issue.
No. He did against Cardiff, in fairness.
He did against Cardiff, yeah. And he had a very good game against Cardiff. But he goes a bit quiet when it comes to making challenges or fighting for the ball, which is the polar opposite to Sam Field. If you could combine Dazelle and Sam Field together, I think you've got a hell of a championship, let alone a Premier League player in there.
Yeah,
but
I agree with that.
You've got Sam Field, who does the dirty work and can knock it onto someone else. And you've got Dazelle, who does no dirty work most of the time, but can play a beautiful pass.
Actually, when Dazelle does try to play dirty, he makes a real hash of it. It's so obviously he's fouled somebody. Sam Field's much more subtle, right?
But he does get a card every game, Field.
Yes, yeah, and I suspect when Colback comes in, he'll be getting them as well. Don't worry. It's the nature of the beast, I think, in that position. Anyway, let's see how they do, and really, I'm just hoping that the centre backs, we end up with 4 fully fit centre backs. That would be nice, plus Gubbins, and that allows us a few options. I really do. We need Clark's all to back fit. For the whole season. Right. Okay, let's move on to our second topic. After the 4-0 defeat by a rampant Watford, which I would say, by the way, I think Watford were great. They really were. I can't get away from that. There were some very angry fans making their voices heard at this match and afterwards on social media. This has led to calls to replace Gareth Ainsworth. But do you think now is the time to consider this, Frankie?
First thing I want to say is I don't necessarily agree that Watford were that great. I think if they played really well and like perfect, I think it could have been 8 or 9-0. I feel like second half they slowed down completely. First half, obviously, they outplayed us on the pitch completely. We might as well have not been on there, but they did miss a lot of chances. And some of them were due to Begovic making saves, and he's been a hell of a signing, it looks like. But I think if it was a better team we played against that day, 7 or 8-0 easy. But on the point of Ainsworth, I'm someone who wants to back the manager rather than slate him. I backed Beale until he left. I backed Critchley until he was gone, and I backed Ainsworth until today because he's still our manager. I think we haven't really got a choice in sacking him because we had to spend the money on Critchley. And he's here for another 3 years. If he can establish a style of football or isn't as mind-numbingly boring as it was as Wickham, but also not be detrimental to us and cause so many losses or so many draws from winning positions, and could get like an 18th or something, I think he's done a hell of a job, especially with how the morale was, how much of a mess it was behind the scenes. but I don't think it's right to call for his head. I understand why people don't like him. It's not the most fun football in the world. It's lump it up to Akinfenwa and let him play it to someone else. That's what it was for about 3 or 4 years at the end until we retired. But he did a hell of a job with Wickham. He brought a team who had the budget of a Vanarama team and got them into the Championship, even though it was a bit circumstantial. But I think if he gets this year done and we get over the FFP stuff, I reckon next season he could kick on, spur on, get us a mid-table spot or even higher. I'm firmly behind Ainsworth and I really want him to do well. Even though I don't care that he was really good for the club as a player, it's our manager. I want him to do well. I don't want to think about sacking our manager. I want to think positively and think I want to get behind the manager. I want him to do well. So I think people calling for his head, I understand why. We got smacked 6-1 at Blackpool, who got relegated. We got 4-0 in the first half of the first game of the season this year. We've let go of Dickey, who was a very popular name amongst certain fans. We let go of Dieng, who was a good Championship keeper on his day, but had a poor season like everyone did. Willock seems like he's going on his way. We've lost a lot of players. But I still believe that he will get the best out of his squad that he can and keep us up. So I don't think we should sack him personally.
Okay, I suspect, I don't know for sure, but I suspect a lot of this was to do with the fact that the last game of the pre-season against Oxford, we were thumped. And the first game of the real season, we were thumped. I think this has got a lot more to do with it than anything else. And I accept what you're saying. I think you've got to be loyal. Let's pretend that QPR has the funds to sack yet another manager, which it hasn't. Paying off Gareth Ainsworth and signing another long-term contract with somebody who's actually going to come to Loftus Road under those conditions. It doesn't look good, does it? It's starting to look like Chelsea. If we had not released Mark Warburton, then perhaps he would be a great candidate. But I very much doubt that the club would eat humble pie and invite him back, and he would return to prove them wrong. I actually doubt there's anyone out there at the moment who wants to manage QPR and that QPR would really want. I very much feel that it's too early for radical change. But if the results have not improved sufficiently by November, the club will have no choice, as the fans and players will be demanding that change. I'm sure it's not just the fans; the players want to win as well. But he's got to be given time to turn this round, and he's got to be able to work with his squad and make things work in terms of these formations and in terms of his strategy. Have they bought into it yet? Who knows? Cardiff was a much better performance. Let's see what happens with it now. Quick one for you, Frankie, before we go. Talk of Ilias Chair going to Leicester. Does that fill you full of dread?
No, it doesn't, because we'll get a good fee for him. And if he was to leave, I wouldn't blame him. I'd be frustrated if he left on a free, more so if he left tomorrow for maybe 5, 6, 7 million. He's been a very good player for us since the kit you've been wearing. That's when he made his debut, and he's been a player for us who's done a job. Better as the seasons have gone on. He's had his little periods where he was poor, like after AFCON and after the World Cup, to be fair, he only played one game at the World Cup, and it was the second half of the third place playoff, which is the most nothing game at the World Cup. And he played the half of the first half out of position in AFCON. So I can imagine it's a mental toll on you, because you look like one of the best players in the league, and you'll go into your international team and they're like, well, we're going to play you out of position, and then you're going to play crap and we're going to sub you off and say that was rubbish. Played striker against Croatia. It's not a 9 at all. But if he was to go to Leicester, obviously it'd be frustrating, because I'd say a league right there in the same league as us. They're not exactly a rival, because they're nowhere near us in terms of ability and in terms of location
and budget.
But I couldn't blame him, and I couldn't hate on him if he was to leave at all. He's done a very good job for us the last 3 or 4 years. He not necessarily replaced Eze, but he's filled in a gap where he's been our number 10 who can drift out wide. He can do a nice bit of skill, beat a player, get a beautiful goal. And it'd be frustrating. I'd hate it because I want him to stay. And it'd be very bad for the team because he's a brilliant player. But it doesn't necessarily fill me with dread because I think we're going to get the good amount of money for him. We don't need to sell him. We want to cash in on Willock whilst we can, keep him. Next season, he's got a year left, sell him then. Or get him a new contract somehow. But I wouldn't necessarily be too down in the dumps because I think we'll get the right money for him if he goes this season.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd much rather Willock went than Chair. I think Chair is contributing to the team in a much better way than Willock seems to at the moment. Willock seems to be at the moment extremely frustrated, and it's sad to see his talent being used the way it is at the moment. It's such a waste. All right, okay, our time is up, and all that remains is for me to thank my guest Frankie for joining me, editor Dave, and all of you for watching. Do click on and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and do add a comment or two below. We love to hear from you, and we do try to respond. I'm Brian Fisher, and this was a Hoops and Dreams QPR podcast. Come on, you R's.
We know who we are. You know who we are. We are QPR.